Good afternoon, evening, wherever you are on your side of the world. Since time doesn't exist, we can be here now together. So let's make the most of this class. For those of you who haven't used Patreon before, welcome. Thank you for being here. If this is your first class, thank you for giving me this platform and trusting your heart enough to consider this work. There's a lot to it, and I am incredibly excited to bring it to you. This is probably my second class about angelics, but it was at least 3 years ago before I've had a chance to teach about it. So really excited to bring it to you again today. It's been a while. For those of you who have followed me over the course of 3 years, you may recognize some of this material, but we're just going to go deeper into it. So for anybody who happens to catch this replay later, I want you to know that you can, if you're not going to make it live, it's okay to put your questions in the comments section in the post whenever I post a class. I normally post it a couple days in advance, 1 to 2 days in advance, which gives all of you plenty of time to put your questions there in case you can't make it. That way you can come back and watch the replay later. Okay. All right, I'm just going to jump right into this material for just a few minutes, but I really want you to load it up with questions for any questions that you have about Christ consciousness, oneness, unity consciousness, angelics, divine creation, everything like that you have. I want you to go ahead and put that in the ask a question section below and in chat as it comes up. And if I say anything that breeds a question from you, feel free to put it there as well throughout the material. The material is actually really, really short, so there's not a lot to say except the history of Elohim, what they are, what their primary purpose is, which is unity consciousness, awareness, and compassion. So we can talk about unity consciousness, awareness, spiritual awakenings and enlightenment are a part of awareness. There are dominant and subdominant purposes that they bring through as a collective, but they are a part of the angelic collectives that created the experience of what humans are calling the Earth Angel experience. For those of you who are coming to Earth and you haven't really been here before and you don't have that as part of your past lives or your experience in the Akasha, the Elohim are the part of you that created the option for you to be a light being and then from frequency create that light experience, that resonance experience as an angelic being into form, into physicality. So the Elohim are creators of all humans and everyone that has ever had a third-dimensional body. So they are a divine creator in that way. And there are many types of angels, starting with the Elohim and the Seraphim, which we've discussed. You also have the Nephilim, which have a little bit of a bad rep, and we'll get there one day, not in this class, talk about the truth of that versus what's just shared in some of the apocryphal text and in some of the Old Testament as well, most of which puts the Nephilim in a bad light. But you have the Elohim and the Seraphim. They begin to create incarnated experiences for purposes of duality. The Elohim are responsible for the sound version of duality, and Seraphim are responsible both for light and sound. You have Oraphim, which are responsible only for light. You have Nephilim, which are responsible for neither. So that's an interesting perspective as well. But the Elohim are the frequency beings. They are divine creators, and they create primarily from sound. And if you notice, for those of you who follow some of the texts in the Bible, in Genesis, there's one of the first things that was said about creation of man was, and God said, let there be light. which made many people believe that we came from light, but we actually were primarily created from sound, and God said, like there had to be a vibration before there could be sound. And then that word created the light, the word, and God said, let there be light. Those words created that light. So Elohim are the biggest divine creator beings that have ever existed. So they are responsible for a lot when it comes to manifestation and creative potential in form. Okay. Having some kind of a weird iCloud problem. This keeps popping up over my screen about it. So hopefully it's not distorting any sound or creating problems. Okay, so being that the Elohims are the first creative expressions of Source, God, oneness, when I say any of those things, I mean the same thing. Oneness is not something that can be defined by human word. Elohim were the first to try to define it. That's why they began to create into form. So then you have God, source, oneness, all of that undefinable God stuff, right? Which we're not going to try to define today. It's just oneness. It's not light, it's not sound, it's beyond that, and it just is. So within that isness, oneness decided to create from sound, and then light, and then other. We'll discuss other some other class about the orphan. So in creation from sound, which was the first divine creative experience, bodies were created, third dimensional duality-based experiences were created, and we expanded from that, and then went into light, and then went into everything else that we wish to create from. So El, that's one of the things that they were called before humans began to create Elohim. So El was the first expression of oneness in singularity. And we talk about this a little bit in the Seraphim channeling. When El was created, it was actually in two different forms, Archangel Michael and Archangel Halal. Halal has been renamed by humans as Lucifer, but whatever. Halal and Michael being responsible for light, and Halal being responsible for sound. So there were those first two creations, and then every other deity, entity, or creation, or angel, divine creator was formed from that. So El was that. El was both Michael and Halal. And then from that point, when they began to create larger collectives, then you had Elohim and Seraphim. So Halal created Seraphim, and Michael created Elohim. I, coming from my personal soul groups, come from Elohim and Michael. He is my primary guardian and angel that has always been around. And I'm from that particular soul group. So for all of you who sometimes feel you get that connection, like really strong connection to Archangel Michael, he created all the other angels, or at least about 50% of them, and Seraphim created the other. So you have that. Anybody have any questions about that? Because in duality, you had to have a type of angelic race that represented light and a type of angelic race that represented sound. So I'm teaching a little bit about Seraphim today in order for you to be able to understand Elohim more. So Elohim then, from that point, began to create other divine creators such as Serapis Bey, who are responsible for something that we call Christ consciousness. The Elohim don't call it that. They call it unity or oneness. So, but when humans began to create like monotheism and things that related to what was meant to be a singularity, they took singularity the wrong way and made it incredibly exclusive. Archangel Metatron comes through the Seraphim. You can ask any questions about which collective any of the angels that you're close to come from, and I can tell you, particularly if they are related to the seraphim and the Elohim. So in my future books, not only will you see the seraphim collective, which I recently showed you, there's going to be a series of that. Elohim is being formatted right now as well, and then there will be Orphim and Nephilim, and so on and so on and so on. There are 11 that we will discuss in books and here. So from the point of time when Archangel Michael began to create Serapis Bay began to create all these other collectives, like El Moria was a collective from Serapis Bay. You may recognize a lot of these ascended masters, Jesus, Buddha Isa, and then all the yogis of the world, particularly the really strong Christ consciousness ones like Yogananda. Someone asked me yesterday about my expressions in my past lifetimes and how it was related to who I am now, and it came through a lot of those beings that I mentioned in the comments section under that Ask Pamela Anything post. A lot of those beings are Elohim. So from that point in time when Michael began to create Serapis Bay created all the other what we call divine creators, otherwise known as gods or deities. He created all of those from that point. And this is just me tracking through the Akasha and telling you my particular filter of how I see the Akasha and how it has looked for me. Someone else, some other teacher may view things incredibly differently. And I don't believe that there's just one perspective, because the Akasha is always seen through your own higher self filter. And that's how you're going to view it. So other people may have other information. I know that some of my work is highly aligned to some of the things that another angelic teacher has taught about. And I know this primarily because I listened to some of his YouTubes and some of the divisions of how he discusses origins of humanity and how they came from angels and who created who. So that teacher's name is Dan Winter, if you want to look him up. And he is really good about how he describes this as well. So you can get a lot more information that we may not have time to discuss today in some of his YouTubes and classes there. Okay, so frequency beings. We talked about Elohim being frequency beings, and you can ask questions about what that means to you. But going back to the first sacred text, at least from the Bible, there are many other sacred texts other than the Bible, and the Bible, quite frankly, has a lot of sacred truths in it, but also has a lot of falsehoods that were misconveyed and filtered through egoic men. So when I say sacred text, I only mean a reference point to what humans believe are sacred. So when God said, "Let there be light," in that particular text, that is a big description of the Elohim and how frequency began and created everything else on earth and how that relates to you. Elohim are, like I said, the beings that created all of Christ consciousness. They are the first angels. So right along with the seraphim, they're responsible for all the other creations of angelics. So Elohim is literally translated to name of God. So you had it pretty much in this order of creation and understanding. You had El, Elah, Elohim, Adon, Adonai, and then something that's not really pronounceable. Before it became Yahweh, it was spelled YHWH in all capital letters, and that is the true original name of Yeshua. But because it went to Yahweh, and then humans turned it into Yeshua, and then humans turned it into Jesus, you're seeing the pattern of how humans really like names when they create. So that's why I can't just give you one, because depending upon perspective and parallel existences, there have been many, many, many names of Elohim throughout the course of the creation of time. So prior to Elohim, if you want to look at name of God before that, I can only tell you the best way to describe it would be divine sound current. I've gotten those three words as a phrase to describe God from every master that I've ever worked with. They keep saying divine sound current. So the name that humans created for that is called Satnam. And it's a very holy, sacred name. And you'll notice that in a lot of my chantings that I teach to you, that Satnam is chanted a lot, and there's a lot of E's and L's and A's in a lot of the source tones that I teach you and share with you, because they reconnect you back to the Elohim part of you. So every single human on the planet has a degree of Elohim in them. It's just a matter of how much you chose and what soul group you're coming from and how you're expressing. So Elohim, that's plural. And many biblical scholars especially will argue that and try to say that because El came first, that it's singular, but from El was then Elohim. So, oh, I'm glad people turned off that car alarm. That was like 4 miles away and I still heard it. The sound is crazy. And when going through the event, my particular sound sensitivity has gotten a little bit annoying. So I'm going to give you some verses in the Bible that will help you understand that Elohim is actually plural and help you understand a little bit of man's perspective about them. So for those of you who follow by certain texts, whether apocryphal text or regular text, you can look this up. So I wrote this down for you in Genesis 1:26. This was the first proof that, or evidential, whatever you want to call it, that Elohim are indeed a soul group, more than just one being. And here it is. Elohim said, quote, "Let us make man in our image according to our likeness." So that, for those of you who follow that, you have it. In Genesis 2:7, here's another one. And Yahweh Elohim, you notice how in some of these texts, both apocryphal and non-apocryphal, BC and AD, all the texts will talk about the various versions of Elohim. So in this one, they talk about Yahweh Elohim. And Yahweh Elohim formed a man from dust of the ground. So that was another example of creation of, of humans. In Psalm 82:6, you are all Elohim and children of the Most High. So when they say Most High, that's Adonai. One of my favorite authors currently right now is Rasha, who wrote many books, particularly my favorite one being the book called Oneness. That will pretty much describe in a way that you can understand the whole course of Elohim, not from Earth's history perspective and the Akasha or any galactic history, but from the perspective of what you need to be doing in form and why oneness created us, why we chose form, and how we can do it without attachment and judgment and understanding how to operate as a frequency being. So if you read that, it'll give you a really simple explanation of all of it. All right. I told you my particular material was short, but I'm going to look at your questions now and go forth with this class from there because we still have a little bit more time to do that. But Elohim, what I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the expression. What I've noticed is that Elohim are empaths because emotion is sound-based and frequency-based. Elohim are the mystics and prophets and channels and writers and dancers. Elohim are anything that forms really strong creativity from emotion, because emotion's basis is sound. Elohim are singers normally, or at least speakers, or if they're not, they have something they want to be writing or creating. Elohim get bored really easily, I've noticed, when they come down as humans. If you have a majority of your higher self components that are Elohim, you will have some of these traits. Elohim are easily overwhelmed. Sometimes we're born with certain sensory processing issues, and just a lot of sensitivities. Okay, your first question. Let's see. Within the Adonai Soul Group, can you talk about the Gatekeeper Collective? Yeah, they are Elohim. Gatekeeper collectives are coming from the El Morye divine creator, and gatekeepers are also primarily Arcturian, and they also come through the Archangel Metatron, just so you know. What is the difference between a soul group and a collective? Nothing. Nothing. Yeah, no difference. Okay. Can we ask, here's another question. How are a council that is observing you usually connected to you? Because in most cases, they created you. They are you. There's a creation factor that comes into play. So it's like family. In my unique level of creation, it was Arcturians that created me. And everyone comes from a unique council. And mine is Adonai, who created Arcturians, who then created me. So you have, aside from just Source, who created Elohim, and then the many factions of Elohim, which we discussed before, like the Yahweh Elohim, the Els, the Adonai, the Adon, all those, the Yahweh, all those begin to create divine creators, like what we discussed, Serapis Bey, Saint Germain, El Morya. There's many, many, many of them. And then they created all the beings that we know as deities, like Jesus and Buddha and all of those. And those beings began to create gurus and masters that you now learn from today, like Yogananda and Babaji, Neem Karoli Baba, Sri Ramana Maharshi, which is my deepest master throughout all my stages of human existence. So, but yeah, insofar as councils, it's a creation connection. It's family. They are soul family. And if you are a part of them, they are a part of you. There's not a distinction being like a hierarchy or anything like that. Beings create over and over and over again. Why are they interested? Well, family is always interested in you. They love you. And they also are interested because they watch you grow. And what the Elohim have described to me is that they split into, like they'll split their aspects, and the more integrated you can be in all of your aspects, the more likely you are to come in as a fully Elohim being. And it is incredible, how much of that can be you teaching them how to be human and how to be informed. So you're helping them as much as they're helping you. There's no hierarchy in this. And really their interest is watching themselves coming through as a projection into a body and then forgetting, going into a deeper state of amnesia and a partial state of deja vu, and then waking up more and more and more. So that's very interesting to them. It always has been. So yes, you are being observed to answer your question and learned from. And you are just as much of a teacher and master because a lot of Elohim beings, I've had a hard time coming into bodies for a long time. That's tough. Is there anything new that the Elohim would like to advise us in regards to connecting with them? New? No. Elohim will always say there's nothing new under the face of the sun, and they're so right. I'm drinking some chai tea today as opposed to coffee, so I won't talk too fast. Has anything changed since the event? There's always going to be changes since the event. I don't want to get too much into the event, but I will if I need to. But the thing about the event is everyone expresses it a different way. You're going to be more connected to aspects of you that are Elohim during this time. And the event has always been a build-up and expansion, and then people forget about it and then go back, and then there's another build-up, expansion, and wave of it. But it's not just one thing where you're suddenly going to wake up and see a bunch of wonderful things and then be ascended in another dimension. Everyone is going to have a unique experience of the event. So there's a lot that is changing, but I can't tell you has an entire collective changed. I haven't seen that yet. They haven't yet. There's some small changes occurring, and there will continue to be more small changes occurring. So that's unique as per the individual that is observing the event. But insofar as connecting to Elohim, I really strongly suggest you getting rid of sound from ego. That's basically meaning thought. And going into Elohim's sound. Have you ever listened to angels when they sing? You know how sometimes I can talk and talk and talk and talk, and ego can come through. If I'm filtering a lesson, I'm trying not to filter from ego, and I'm just trying to stay focused, but ego still comes through. Well, that type of sound is not what's connecting you to Elohim. What will connect you to Elohim is trying to get human words and thoughts out of the way and connecting to divine sound current, which is what they have always taught me. You can learn more about divine sound current. Oh, I can't believe I didn't go get the book because I don't remember the author. You can Google the author because you will not find anything else with this title. The book is called The Path of the Masters. And there's a big discussion about the truth of divine sound current and how you can recognize a true master and guru. That's been coming up a lot lately, how to connect to masters and how to connect to gurus and how to know what's real without giving away your power. And that book is really effective for that. Yes, Julian Johnson. Thank you so much. I knew it was Julian, but I didn't know about that last name, and that was so simple. He is American. He is not a master. He is a student of a really strong master. Quick what? Sorry, Robin, I just saw that pop up when you said that. I'm like, what do you mean? So, yeah, she was quick to post that. You're right. Thank you for your fast Googling. You're amazing, both of you. So basically reading that book will really help you connect more from an Elohim perspective, or at least it did me, but it is heavy reading material. It is everything that I teach kind of condensed into one book. And everything meaning everything about Elohim. It can never be everything. If I'm still alive, there will be more, tons more. Connecting to Elohim, back to that, connect through sound. Sri Ramana Maharshi taught me at a really early age to use his self-inquiry process by asking, who am I? And once I fully mastered the self-inquiry process, which you can find in his book that one of his strongest devotees wrote about his teachings, go straight to chapter 4 and do this process. Don't worry about the rest for now. The rest can be incredibly profound and difficult, at least if you don't get this down. But in order to connect to true divine sound current, I really strongly suggest doing this process. Chapter 4 of the book, Be As You Are by Sri Ramana Maharshi, M-A-H-A-R, stop it, Khan, M-A-H-A-R-S-H-I. He's like, are you going to get the spelling right this time? I'm like, well, I was until you interrupted me. My guides are a bit of a hoot lately, I'll tell you what. So when you do this process, you basically go into a deep meditation and try to ask the question, who am I? And then when thoughts arise, which they will, no matter what they are, whether they're positive or negative, you will ask the question, to whom do these thoughts arise? And of course, your normal answer would be to me, to I, and then you ask the question again, who am I? Sounds like a boring process, but do it over and over again until you get out of the boredom stage, until all thoughts dissipate, and until you go into a place that's kind of like a void. It's like just a stillness, and you get nothing. The point is not to go into anything clairvoyant and magical. We're not going to be seeing any unicorns in these meditations for quite some time. But you will connect to a deep stillness at first. And the more you do this, some people it takes days, weeks, months, sometimes years, but the more you do this and master ego, the more you can really, really connect to sound. And then sound, if you're an Elohim being, sound will come first. If you're a Seraphim being, it'll be very, very interesting because light and sound will come together. If you're an Orphan being, light will come and you will see things. So there are many, many things that will happen thereafter, but I don't want to just give that information to you without you experiencing, because it dulls that experience. And this is how you get into a deeper opening of your gifts. is by connecting to divine sound current, that you cannot hear divine sound current if your ego chatters as much as mine does. At least in classes. I have to talk a lot. There's a lot to teach. Next question. Yes, Serapis Bay is a prime creator. Who are the others? A lot. A lot. You can, perhaps if you Google Rays of Ascension, Rays of Ascension prime creators, they will come up. That's what my guides are saying. Google in that facet, and we can talk about it as much as you like. But for Elohim, the primary ones are Serapis Bay and El Moria, or El Moria, depending upon how you pronounce that particular prime creator. And then many other beings are created from there. How is unity consciousness different from working towards a non-duality? It isn't. They are one and the same. Unity is non-duality. What is, or is there a connection between the Elohim and Aldebaran? More of a seraphim connection there, not Elohim. Is it fairly easy to feel unity and love with people who are primarily of service to others? Oh, it is fairly easy to feel unity and love with people who are primarily in service to others. Can Elohim give an example of feeling unity and love with those who are primarily of service to self? It's difficult to hug a porcupine. Yes, you watched my teaching on that. No offense to the four-legged being. But it is incredibly rewarding when the porcupine puts down their quills. Just so you know. Yeah, they can give an example to answer your question. But humans don't do it, is the problem. They can give you many examples, of feeling love and unity, because they feel a lot of love and unity. There were many Elohim beings who fell into disastrous situations, at least from the duality perspective, and who took upon very difficult contracts. Particularly, their deepest example is those of you who experience abductions. And when operating from a dualistic reference point, you will perceive an abduction from fear. And when you do so, at first you really have a hard time understanding why you're experiencing that, especially the negative abductions that are painful, and you feel tortured and those contracts, because fear makes you believe that that's what's happening. But what I've seen in abductees who have the dualistic experience of it is that they eventually switch over and they become willing students to the masters who are allegedly abducting them. And if you're going to follow me from a dualistic perspective, you're going to get really mad at me right now. But I will continue. There is a point in time when I observe these abductees that they stop thinking that what's going to happen is bad. And they surrender, and then pain stops becoming suffering, and they begin to learn from the beings who are abducting them by forgiving them and offering them compassion, trust, acceptance of the situation, which leads to flow, which leads to the perfect experience of grace, which is the primary reason for coming into an incarnated existence as an abductee. So that is one very big example, is that when you understand the forgiveness and the love and the compassion and the trust and the acceptance and the flow, the unity and grace that occurs thereby from all those lessons, then you do not perceive an abduction as anything bad. Your entire experience shifts, and then the extraterrestrials will say to you, everything that you thought just happened, you created it from your fear. We weren't doing those things. This is what we were doing all along, is to honor this contract. And you created a scenario, a story that isn't real in your third dimensional illusory experience. And we are not third dimensional beings. So you created the experience of pain and suffering, and we allowed you to create it when the whole time we weren't doing any of those things. And this is to understand how your stories can be disempowering and turn into pain and suffering until you realize that you are not your body, and that you cannot be harmed, and that you cannot be powerless, and that you cannot die. So that's one primary example that they've always given me, Maria. You always have such good, intelligent questions. I love you so much. That made me need a little bit more caffeine, though. Next question. Do thought forms become real? It's so funny, that's the next question. Or, what are the entities that attach to people and live in the body? They are thought forms that become an incarnated experience, and then humans create names and definitions called demons and other things. Does that simplify it? And then she goes on to ask, I've seen where a QHHD practitioner had the higher self do a body scan and remove beings from the eye. The higher self can do that. These beings stated that they just floated around, looked for an opening, and they chose her eyes because they wanted to see. Oh, wait. She said from higher self that they entered the body when she used drugs once. Yes, but that's still a contract that you choose prior to a projected incarnated experience. And you know that there's a high alignment that if you do drugs that you're going to create from fear a certain entity that wants to use your eyes for looking. It's kind of like a symbiotic experience. They are learning something from you because they can see through your eyes from a third dimensional experience and see what fear looks like, how fear feels like, how all those things, and they are simultaneously giving you a lesson from which you will gain much expansion when you release that fear that they are creating. So do you see the symbiotic nature and how they are serving you? Releasing fear is, oh my goodness, the greatest thing that they could ever possibly teach you. Okay? So the answer is both. They are both form and creation from you. As gatekeeper of Mount Carmel, we had an opening the gatekeeper ceremony over the weekend. Ashley felt you during that so strongly. I stopped what I was doing and dropped to my knees and cried. Not a negative cry, though. I feel that we are still aligning and would appreciate any guidance. Yeah. They're suggesting discipline in the frequency management of your collective. More gatherings, and then allow the frequency and the state of bliss that you are creating during those gatherings to perpetuate into your daily lives. So more discipline in controlling the frequencies that you are creating on a day-to-day basis. And that's for each of the members when they go into their human lives, in their 3D lives, if you will. I'm having a hard time with empathy, controlling my mood sometimes when feeling for others. Is there any way to deal with the stress of empathy? Oh, absolutely. I just experienced this yesterday where I was being absolutely flooded with a particular emotion. And it wasn't a bad emotion, but I had to get a lot done. And it was a little distracting because it was powerful. So what you do is you channel the emotions as a divine creator. You take that frequency and ask yourself how you can let that frequency really be fuel for what you need to do and how you wish to create. So basically how you do that is to use the word command. When you say, I command my power to create with this emotion for the highest and best of all. Whatever you're doing, that particular frequency is commanded to work for you and not against you, because you are the masters of your emotions. And this is how I really love creating from very high frequency emotions. And this is when shamanism comes out and sound healing comes out and grids and books and as an Elohim creator, as opposed to creating from that mood, as opposed to being controlled by that mood, you can create from that mood. So it doesn't matter if you think the mood is bad. How can you create from it? Doesn't matter what it is. I've created while absolutely feeling like I couldn't even breathe or move with so much overwhelming tears and sadness. I've created from anger. Yeah, I have. I become a catalyst when I get angry, and I begin to say things that really catalyze people. And then one of my higher self aspects, known as Katara, comes through, and she speaks as an aspect of Lilith, and that's how those beings came through me. It's because of that, wanting to create from what I was experiencing that most people would assume is negative. Yes, Firamu, the alchemy symbol for receiving is an excellent way to connect to Elohim. And many of the alchemy symbols that I've taught in the classes are very relevant to connecting to Elohim, especially the receiver. Let's look at some of your questions. We still have a few more minutes. I have heard star beings can use sound to create light. Yes, and we will discuss that a lot. I believe it's next Friday. The Sun Collective, the Sun Elemental Collective channeling, which will discuss the raw group, the raw material, Horus, and all of sound in relation to how it became light, and then what happens from there. So sound really connects to all the beings that are Telosian, in the Inner Earth collectives. I channeled them when I channeled Adama, otherwise known as Adamas. Those are the two primary names he goes by. So all the beings in Inner Earth collective, particularly the Lemurians and the Telosians, Argarthians as a whole, are connected to sound. And then when sound becomes light, you have the Atlanteans and all of that was from Upper Earth. So you have deeper Inner Earth and then Upper Earth. There are various collectives of the Telosians. So your answer is yes. Elohims can use sound to create light. It is part of alchemy, which is something that most Elohim beings love. Alchemy is primary to everything that we do. How can you speak with them? You have to silence your mind first. You have to really get out of thought. For those of you who really don't feel connected to the self-inquiry process and you want to quell your thoughts more quickly, you can also listen to binaural beats and isochronic tones or source tones, which is why I give source tones so often, because they calm people down enough to be able to do self-inquiry. So you can get a lot of the really good binaural beats and isochronic tones. There's a YouTube channel that I really love, and they're like 8 hours long, these binaural beats. And if you do them, listen to them when you're sleeping or when you're meditating, it's really helpful to calm your thoughts down so that you can invoke the Elohim to speak through you. Are all the Elohim still creating? Absolutely. And they always will be, Charles. They always will be. Can earthly family members, i.e. mother, sister, me, all be Elohim but from different groups? Adonai, El, etc. Yes, and it's quite common that they choose to project that way as a matter of perspective, in my perspective, because you learn more that way if you catalyze each other and you have your differences. And basically with the Adonai are kind of the more catalyzing. I am Adonai, and Adonai are primarily here to be catalysts and activators. El are here for connection and unity. All of these various versions of Elohim. The Yahweh are here for a big purpose of empowerment. Empowerment's the biggest thing with the Yahweh. So there are different, and when they come together, particularly the Adonai and the Yahweh, normally Yahweh are male and they're more divine masculine, and normally Adonai are either neutral or very divine feminine. So when those two groups come together in families of any variety, whether it be, brother, sister, mother, daughter, romantic, whatever, they tend to, the Yahweh empowers and strengthens the Adonai, and the Adonai calms and grounds and kind of heals the Yahweh. So there's various reasons. The YouTube channel, yes, for the binaural beats. Thank you. I almost lost that, Maggie. It is N as in Nancy, U, like the letter, NU meditation, all together. Or actually separate, NU and then meditation. Next question from chat. This may sound crazy. Everyone always precedes it with that. It never does. But can someone be a reincarnated angel but have a person in the same family that is dark? Not just can they, it's really common. Not sure I want to use the word evil. Yeah, absolutely. Hence the narcissist empath dynamic. If you go to my website, that's PamelaAaralyn.com. Please don't go to the aurareader.com anymore. It's incredibly outdated. So we're going to be redirecting it soon. I just don't know how yet. So if you go to PamelaAaralyn.com and look up my blog called, two of them actually, Forgiveness, the Narcissist Empath Connection, and then Walking on Eggshells. Those two blogs will explain the experience of the reincarnated angel and basically the empath and the narcissist. So that's why people come in with those particular personality types and expressions, because they really need to learn from each other. Okay. When the term arc or arch is used to describe angels, I know it's not due to hierarchy. Yeah. Mankind tried to make it about hierarchy and have created all these negative stories about Illuminati and control and archons and all these things. Those are all fear-based human stories. And they may be relevant to people who want to believe in them for reasons of releasing their powerlessness and negative core beliefs. And until they're ready to stop believing human stories, they will also believe that they're going to be one day invaded, or, perhaps stock markets are collapsing and everything's, as Master Lavallee said it so clearly when someone came to him once as a student and asked him a kind of a question about this kind of thing and why it happens on Earth. He said, "Oh, you're screwed. We're all goners." He didn't use the word screwed, but he said, "Yeah, we're all goners. All this is bad, And he was joking with the student because he was helping the student release that story. And the student got angry, but at some point, I believe that student released that story because it no longer served him. Going back to your question, if it's the case, do they mean arch, like story arches? Well, if you want to create that story, is what the Elohim said. If that's the case, do they play other roles as archangels for other beings of consciousness? They do in human stories. I'm not really sure how to answer that because it's all based on what you believe. And it's not one thing. Elohim are not responsible for story. They're here to help you release it. Can songs that resonate deeply with me connect me and us with Elohim, like the Hue sound, for example? Yes, Hue is a strong Elohim collective source tone, very much, as is E, like that's just a long-term E. Do you want me to give you the 3-part source tone to call in Elohim? I can give it to you and teach it to you right now. It's really not that easy, but if you learn it, you can connect to them really, really quickly. And this was taught to me about age 6, was when I started singing what my parents called weird intonations. And they were like, why is she always singing that? We don't know what that is. Yeah, you want it. Okay, we'll do it. So these are called source tones. The hue represents the L in Elohim. The E, which is a long E, represents the Adonai. And the NRG portion of it represents all the other collectives in Elohim. So when you sing these three source tones, they're going to sound like they're one, and you're going to let vowels blend into each other. So it's not like you're singing hu, e, which NRG is an like purse your lips like that, like a fish, to sing it. You're going to let it blend. So there are vowels between vowels and consonants that you will notice. Let them just blend into each other. So it'll sound a little bit like hu, e, and that's not. It's just when you write it or type it, it's HUEENRG. So you're not seeing all that's in there, but you've got to let the vowels and the sounds between the sounds come out, and you'll be able to get it. So when you're first singing hu, when you go up to E, if this is your palate, for many of you who follow my work a lot, you know what I'm about to do. This is the top of your mouth, this is the palate on top, and this is the bottom, top teeth, bottom teeth. So basically, if this is your tongue, when you get up to E, I want you to raise it. This is like the tip of your tongue up here. Can everybody see my hand? So if this is the tip of your tongue, you want to move it from the bottom all the way up here, about 1 centimeter below the top palate of your mouth and about 1 centimeter behind your front teeth. But you're not going to touch the top of your mouth. You're just going to put it there. And then when you go to from E to you're going to move it back and forth until you find, start back. And if that doesn't happen, just keep going back with the tip of your tongue without touching the top of your mouth, and then move it forward again until you find what I call the sweet spot. So this sweet spot is the part of source tone singing that will connect you to what is called an overtone, which is a really high pitch. Like there's your singing, and then there is something else that's going to come on top of it. That source tone, that overtone, is what is going to connect you to these angels. Okay? You want to try it with me? The lower you sing it, the more chances you are going to have to hear your overtone. Also, if you practice in the shower, you will hear it more. Or if you practice with earbuds in, you will hear it more. Okay, so it's this. And pay attention to the vowels in between, the hu, the e, and the You got that? So there's just a little bit of, I'm not just singing hu, e, I'm letting vowels slip into each other, and that takes some practice. But the biggest part of that source tone example is for you to find your overtone. And when you do this, it's going to get a lot easier. Now, try not to move your mouth when you do this. Have you noticed that when I sing source tones, my mouth doesn't move? It's the tongue that's moving. It's not the mouth. None of my facial muscles move very much. But when you get to the you want to pull your lips in like a fish and do this. So silly. Got it? So again. You have your teeth stuck together the whole time? No. You got to keep your mouth slightly ajar in order to do this. Your mouth is open in there a little bit, maybe about this much. So don't close your teeth together. You definitely want to open your mouth just a little bit. You have questions about it? Does anyone have questions on how to do that? This will teach you everything about all the other source tones that we sing to call in all the other angelics. And the more you do this, you're going to have an instant connection. Yeah. Thank you, Sylvia. I am, in my singing, primarily an overtone singer. What are the last three letters? It's hu, hu, and then that's the first set, and then e, e, and then nrg. So there's a lot of reference to nrg in Sanskrit and Gurmukhi, and yeah, exactly that. hu, e, e, nrg. Does anyone else have any questions about how to do it? It's a really good technique. I use it almost every single day. You asked above? I didn't see it. Oh, I think I'm doing it wrong, but I'm getting overtones. My mouth moves. And I don't want you to, it's the inside of your mouth can move as need be. And you want to experiment with how much, if this is your palate, and we'll use this hand because I'm better at this hand when explaining this. Sometimes mine is about right here, you know, you're not going to have your mouth wide open. You're not going to clamp it together. It's about halfway, but everybody's got a different mouth and makeup and different everything for that matter. We're all unique. So sometimes it might be closer. Sometimes it might be more. So I want you to kind of practice how much of that you have in the openness of your mouth when doing these overtones. And when you follow this by singing the overtones that are in that accompany the alchemy symbols, you will call in almost every single angelic being that I have ever taught you about, and even that I haven't taught you about, but will one day. When I've played with overtones singing, I've only gotten overtones from a different spot further back in the roof of my mouth. You have a Taurus palette? Yeah, if you have a Taurus palette, there are other types of overtone singing and tutorials that might do you better. And you can find somebody who's good at Google do this for me. Go over to YouTube or someone who's good at YouTube searching rather. YouTube search overtone tutorial Anna, A-N-N-A. I'd give you her last name, but it's like Czechoslovakian or something. I can't pronounce it. And you will come across a beautiful woman with short black hair, and most of her videos are in black and white. And she teaches various ways of how to find your overtone. And there's one that she teaches about, teaches for people who have the Taurus palette. And it's basically a type of overtone singing where you move your tongue. If this is your tongue and it's at the bottom of your mouth, you will actually, it's easier for you to move the back of your tongue as opposed to lifting it. You will get more by keeping this part of your tongue flatter, not fully touching, but flatter, and raise and move the back part of your tongue. That might work better for you, Maggie, but Anna explains it a lot more in very succinct definition, and she's very helpful, so you might want to check her out. Yeah, she's one that I've personally trained with a good while ago. She's right when she first started doing it. She's really good. And then she stopped training people, so I was lucky to be able to sit with her and learn all those things. Thank you, Sylvia. You guys are excellent. Search it. And, yeah, Anna Maria Huffley. A long time since I sat with her. I also learned from Stuart Pierce, a few times, and he's amazing. He's just absolutely amazing. I don't think he teaches it anymore, but you guys can Google him. He is an angelic being like me. I feel like he is a little bit more seraphim collected, but he could probably tell you. He doesn't even like to talk about those things. He just loves angels and likes to talk about angelics, and he's amazing. We're really close friends. But you can just look at him and see his light. So I'm more sound being and he's more of a light being. Stuart Pierce. Yeah, you can just do stuartpierce.com or voiceoftheangels.com. And a lot of his books, he talks about, where these angelics come from. And it's all very accurate and right in alignment with what I'm teaching you today as well. But he taught me personally as well. While he was still teaching master vocals, but he used to be really, and probably still teaches to some celebrities, some vocal teachings, but primarily he channels and writes these days and teaches workshops in Egypt. And he's amazing. He has a big Egypt connection. He's also freaking gorgeous. He's the most gorgeous gay man on the planet. And I tell him all the time, I'm women everywhere want him. He's but I'm gay. It's hilarious. He's great. Yeah, he taught Lady Di, and he has a strong connection, and he's writing a book about Lady Di right now. So he just went public with that and started talking about that. He's amazing. I love him so much. That man is so much in my heart. We're so close. Tight. Okay, a couple more minutes. I'll take a couple more questions. Had a dream 2 nights ago where I went to spirit school and I was told I was getting very close to fusing back with source. Well, that's good. I mean, it doesn't mean anything other than you're standing in your oneness and you're going towards enlightenment. That's really good. If you're having trouble with it, just ask for help. No, I don't really want to talk much about Sophia code activations. They are amazing. So is all alchemy and sacred geometrical activations and sound activations. And everyone's different. For some people, it works great. But if you, based upon what the question said, I'll just read what she's saying. She says, some people think they're incredible and some others believe you should go directly to source instead of going through intermediaries. Thank you for that link, Sylvia. You're amazing. Yeah, but you are divine creators. You can choose any modality that you want. It's not bad that some of the modalities work for some of you and some they don't. It doesn't mean that if it doesn't, that modality or teaching is bad. You're different beings, and I mean, you're still oneness, but you have unique creative expressions, and it's going to work for some of you and it's not going to work for others. You know, I've had clients who love it and have clients who are absolutely terrified of it. So the belief that one thing would be like bad brings you back to duality every single time. You know what I mean? So choose what works for you. Everything is source. I had a dream where there was a psychic inside and gave me a reading. She said something I was putting in my mouth every day was making me sick. It's Colgate. She said it was Colgate. She said, you know what that means. So I guess change toothpaste. Oh, your higher self. Okay, good. You're welcome. I really like Tom's with myrrh. They make it with myrrh. I like that one. For some reason, it's very high frequency and there's no fluoride in it. Elohim created body and mind. Soul expression is unique from, it's from your particular collective, and that Elohim, if you come from that collective, they created body and mind. Spirit cannot be created. Spirit is oneness and always just is. There's no race in association with. Spirit is divine sound current. Spirit is source and oneness. Deodorant. I also like Tom's. Yeah, but many people like different things. But yeah, I like Tom's for a lot of different things. And you can get it for a fairly reasonable price at Trader Joe's, which is one of my favorite stores. And I think it Sprouts as well. What is the story about not going to the light if you die? Oh, sweet baby Jesus, don't get me started. If you have that belief that if you go to the light that something's bad is going to happen, and if you come back and that you'll be forced into reincarnation cycle and all that, then guess what? You create that experience. If you believe that the light is beautiful and wonderful, you create that experience, and then you choose when or if you come back, and you choose exactly how. The problem is with fear-based beliefs. If you have a positive belief, you get that experience after you die. If you don't, you get that experience after you die. No matter what you are experiencing, once you go to the light, you're going to experience oneness and unity and love. And whether or not you reincarnate or not is completely up to you always, with the exception of you having that fear-based experience of being afraid of the light and being forced into the reincarnation trap, which temporarily creates that whole experience over again. You see, irony of these teachings? These teachings drive me nuts. What's going out there and what's around about, oh my God, don't go to the light. See, my ego's coming out. It drives me crazy. People are teaching to stay in the astral. Well, if you like the astral, I mean, what else are you going to do? You're not going to go in the light and you're just going to become spirit guides and help with your family. That's fine. But if you have fear and you're in the astral, then you're going to stay in a lower level of the astral that creates more fear. Have you ever watched What Dreams May Come? Seriously, fear is a creator too. I love to sing and believe I have a powerful voice, but I'm powerlessly shy. God, I feel you. I wonder if I should pursue music publicly to release. Yes, if you wonder, do it. There's a reason why wonder comes. What did you say about working with Archangel Michael? Just that he is the first angel that was created from the Elohim, along with Archangel Halal, which represents seraphim. They are created simultaneously from oneness. So they are Elohim and seraphim beings, one representing light and one representing sound. I already gave the reading list throughout most of the teachings. Should I write? Well, write is one way to connect to yourself and that aspect of you that is Elohim. So yeah, I do recommend it. Okay, guys, it looks like all of the questions have been answered and we're a little over our time. So I'm going to go ahead and go. Thank you for all of your questions. And try not to make it a this or that. Make it more like a everything. There's nothing wrong with connecting to light. There's nothing wrong with connecting to sound. You can connect to all of it and go into your full expression. If you connect with one more so the other, then do it. So we will follow up a lot more on some of this in my channeling coming up of the Sun Collective, the Elemental Collective channeling of the Sun next week, as well as the Galactic History, which I believe is a Tier 2 class. But we will follow up a lot more on the role of the Elohim and the Seraphim, the Oraphim, and other angelics in the Galactic History class. Okay? Much love. Namaste.